Please welcome Gavin Jackson, Managing Director, UK and Ireland at Amazon Web Services.
Hi. Thank you. Thank you very much, and good morning, and welcome to the first ever AWS Transformation Day. Sounds fancy, huh? Transformation Day. We're really excited about today because this is the first time we've ever run an event in this sort of format with this sort of audience before. This is not going to be your typical sort of AWS deep tech fest today. Today, really, we have line of business functions instead of general technologists in the room. We have around 700 or so people from pretty much every function in business, from finance and sales and marketing to governance, risk and compliance, and security, and so on and so forth. And there's probably some technology leaders in the room as well. And this is also not your typical AWS content that we're going to be delivering today. It's not that sort of deep technical content either. So let me explain. In the summer, we host our large sort of AWS London Summit. And this year in the summer, we had around 7,000 people come and join us at the Excel in London. And those summits really are for technologists and sort of by technologists. So our customers get to come and tinker with the technology, right? They get access to demonstrations, they get training, right? They're able to take professional certifications and really kind of get their hands dirty on the technology itself. And then we also have customers come and tell us about how they're using technology with AWS. So for instance, BP came and told us how they're migrating their business critical applications, including SAP, to AWS, and gaining 40% more speed at a fraction of the cost. And then Deliveroo told us how they're building their AWS, using AWS data services to build a data lake so that they can draw all of their core business processes, like their ordering services, their delivery services, and their forecast data and so on. And then Ocado told us how they're building their Ocado Smart Platform on AWS, which is their e-commerce fulfillment and logistics platform, which helps other bricks and mortar retailers become effective online businesses as well. What the summit doesn't really kind of cover is how and why companies transform their businesses with AWS and with the cloud. And so really today really is all about how you can learn from each other and learn from subject matter experts and really kind of answer the most common questions that we hear more often than not from our customers. So that's really kind of the setup for today. Now, it wouldn't be an AWS event if it wasn't for our excellent partners, and I absolutely include our platinum sponsors for today, Clarinet, who have built a very successful practice with AWS over recent years. Partners have really been at the center of the AWS story from the beginning, and we really encourage you to spend some time with our partners down in the Partner Expo area downstairs. While we're on the subject of partners, I'm thrilled this morning also to announce that KPMG are going to be collaborating with AWS to transform businesses and accelerate their journey into the cloud. KPMG bring a wealth of experience in risk and compliance, as well as technology strategy. And what they're doing now is combining that with an AWS practice to help customers to transform their business with AWS. So really excited about the relationship with KPMG. I'm also excited about the relationship that we're building with BT, who this morning have released a press release to say that they also are collaborating with AWS, and they're doing so by building security services and network services with AWS for their customers, and a hybrid cloud landing zone, which helps customers to migrate their applications safely and securely. So really kind of building on that partner ecosystem. We're thrilled with both of these two partnerships. I make no assumptions as to how much you know about AWS. I know this is quite a new audience for AWS. So what I wanted to do is just give you a whistle-stop tour as to how AWS has progressed over the last number of years. And really it's not intended to be a pitch. Right? It's intended to give you just an introduction and also just to tell you how fast customers are adopting the cloud computing and so on, so that you're in good company. So at this point, AWS has around 11.5 years of experience, and in that time, we've become the fastest growing enterprise technology company of any time in history. Such is the shift that we're seeing just broadly towards cloud computing. We now have millions of customers across pretty much every vertical segment imaginable, from the largest companies on the planet in oil and gas and financial services and retail and manufacturing and energy and so on, to government agencies and non-profit agencies, to startups, including the majority of the unicorns, the billion-dollar valuation companies that you see out in the market, to all the way down to SMEs and sort of single occupier companies as well. So right across the board, companies are using AWS in a meaningful way. We now have, as of last week, we announced the Amazon earnings for last week, just a few days ago. And we announced at that point that AWS is now an $18.3 billion company in its own right, still growing at 42% year over year, which is just unprecedented for an enterprise technology company and really kind of just illuminates the speed in which customers are adopting the cloud. And again, I don't say these things to be celebratory towards AWS. I just say these things because it just sort of illuminates really how fast people are adopting the cloud. And one of the reasons they're doing that is because AWS has the broadest, most fully functioning technology infrastructure platform in the world. And it covers pretty much everything you need to build a modern technology-led business into the future, including the underlying sort of building blocks, the infrastructure layer of compute and storage and networks and all the things you might need to run a business, but also then deep security services, and such as we have GDPR-ready services that you can search, tag, audit, and then encrypt your data. We have a number of data services, including a very broad variety of databases and BI tools and analytics tools and so on. We have machine learning tools and AI tools and mobile developer tools, general DevOps tools, IoT services, you name it. It's a very complete, very comprehensive technology infrastructure platform. And we also have the AWS Marketplace, which helps you to buy the software that you choose and have it pre-integrated into your AWS environment with one single bill. And it just saves you the time and the money and the effort that it takes to sort of migrate that workload and that application somewhere down into the future. It's a very comprehensive and broad technology stack from AWS. And then we take that technology stack around the world. And at this point, we have 44 availability zones around the world. Availability zones are clusters of data centers across 16 regions around the world, and we have more imminently launching just very soon, and we plan to launch more as well down the line. So we're spending billions on infrastructure around the world that you'll never need to purchase again. That's really the essence of why we do these things. And finally, just as this whistle-stop tour, we're recognized by Gartner as being the standout leader in cloud infrastructure services. And while this picture sort of tells you a lot of what you need to know, what it doesn't tell you is that Gartner also in the same report go on to say that AWS has several times more capacity deployed than the next 14 cloud providers combined, which again just gives you a sense as to how quickly the cloud is being adopted and how quickly it's being adopted with AWS. Now that's the only pitch you're going to hear today, and I mentioned it's not really a pitch, it's just an update, it's an introduction. Today is about answering questions. And questions as to how you can use AWS Cloud and technology in general to transform your business. And the first question I get asked more often than not is, how does Amazon innovate? Right? So how does Amazon innovate? And I'm delighted to help me answer that question. I've been joined by the Vice President for Innovation at Amazon.com, Paul Meisner. Over to you, Paul.
Well, good morning. Let me add my welcome to all of you to Transformation Day. Now, I was listening to Gavin's remarks just a second ago and thinking, you know, this sounds very familiar to me. I've worked for a lot of large enterprises over my career, including one of our partners, Intel Corporation, but I've only worked for one startup, and that's Amazon. When I joined the company in late '99, early 2000, we were an unprofitable little business that everybody thought was going to go out of business. But when we started in business, we relied heavily on existing infrastructure providers. In fact, we could not have run an online retail business without extant infrastructure providers. There were the telcos who provided the access for our customers. There were the ISPs who gave that further TCP/IP access. There were the delivery companies who were delivering the products that we were selling and shipping out. They're the credit card processing companies. I mean, see, think about all this. There's all this infrastructure that existed that we relied on. We could not have made a business of online retail without them. And so the existence of these infrastructure providers allowed us to focus on what differentiated our business, which was online commerce. It was new at the time. It's not so new anymore. But it's a good lesson in the sense that we came in as a small startup and were able to rely on existing infrastructure providers to focus on what differentiated our business. Well, so in late 99, 2000, we were an innovative company. And our most recent innovation at the time was the introduction of the sale of tools. Tools, hammers, saws, screwdrivers, those sorts of things. And it's kind of cool to see that after 11 and a half years now, we are still providing a new set of tools, compute, storage, AI, machine learning, and such, in the same way. And I will tell you, after these 18 years, obviously a lot have changed at Amazon, right? The scale and the scope of the company has grown tremendously, as Gavin's numbers showed. But at the same time, how we do things has stayed more the same than has changed. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about how we think about and go about innovation at Amazon. But I want to make clear from the outset a couple of things. First of all, this is the way we innovate at Amazon. It's not necessarily the best way. It's certainly not the only way to innovate. It's just the way that we do it. So I'm not suggesting that this is, some kind of a stone tablet suggestion to you, but I do have some specific suggestions that I will offer throughout the course of my brief remarks. 6 of them, to be exact. 3 of them are really kind of easy. You can try these at home, or try these in your enterprise, try these in your organization for very little cost, very little risk to you in your organization. And if they work, that's great. If they don't, that's also okay. It's just it's not the only way to do things. And then there are 3 other ones that I'm going to offer to you that are harder, and I get that. They take time, they take patience, and sometimes those are difficult commodities to find. But I'll also offer those to you as we talk. So how has Amazon gone from startup to relatively large enterprise? How have we done this, but at the same time maintain the startup culture of innovation? Well, there are a bunch of different ways that we've done that. One of which involves this, pizza. All right, so it's kind of a techie, kitschy thing perhaps, but here's the idea. Whenever we face a particular challenge or opportunity, the first group of individuals within the company that will address that challenge or opportunity is called a 2-pizza team. And the idea of the 2-pizza team is that it's a dedicated team, not necessarily within the same organizational silo, but players brought from throughout the company to address this opportunity or challenge. But the number of individuals involved in this team should be a number comfortably fed by 2, say, extra large American-style pizzas. So call them, well, is 4 people enough? Well, no, that's too much pizza. Is it 13 or 14? That's not enough pizza. It's somewhere in there. So call it 6 to 12, something like that. And you say, well, that's cute, but why not just assign a number to it? Why not say it's 8? 8 people serve on the team to address opportunities and challenges. Well, what happens if this team is working along and after a couple of months they discovered that, gee, we really need an expert in artificial intelligence. There's a woman down the hall who is available, who has the expertise, who's happy to join this team. Well, but that would be 9. So we can't invite her to join the team. Well, that would be stupid, right? That would be a dumb outcome if you couldn't invite her to join the team. So that makes 9. Well, then you might say, well, what happens if you need a statistician and an economist and another SDE, et cetera? And you keep adding on and on and on. There's no limit. You could always continue to add expertise. But here's the problem. At some point, the team starts to fragment. The communications links among the members of the team are so complicated that it no longer functions as a single team. It actually starts to break up into multiple teams, and the communications inefficiencies are so great that it just doesn't work anymore. And that number is, somewhere on the order of 10, 11, 12 people, where it all falls apart. Okay. Well, that's the two-pizza team. By the way, this is something that's easily tried in your organizations. And if you're a small organization, if you actually are a startup, you may always be in a two-pizza team mode, right? But as a medium-sized or a large enterprise can try this. And if it doesn't work, that's okay. There's no harm in it, except maybe a lot of pizza eaten. But the whole thing is that this is one of those suggestions that you might try just to see how it works out. Okay, well, obviously, two pizza teams aren't the only way that Amazon goes about and thinks about innovation. So we operate under what are called leadership principles. And these leadership principles are available on our website, so you can go check them out. And it turns out that there are 14 of them. And 14 is a big number to keep anything sort of top of mind. So what I want to do today is to suggest to you that the 3 of these really stand out at Amazon as ones that we use in the context of innovation. Now, leadership principles at Amazon aren't just something sort of tacked on the wall. They actually form a core of how we evaluate candidates for new jobs at Amazon. If a candidate comes in and interviews for anything but the most junior positions, even sometimes the junior positions, but certainly if you're in a mid-level position or above, these candidates are grilled on leadership principles. Give me examples of where you've demonstrated the ability to be frugal, for example. And then we want to be able to test against all these. So at some level, the people that join Amazon have already been through the filter of their leadership principles. They also guide how we evaluate ourselves, at least annually, in our performance reviews. We have to measure up against these leadership principles. But most importantly, these actually do guide our day-to-day thinking. This is how we do business at Amazon. We follow these leadership principles. Now, what are shown here on the screens are just the names, the titles of them. On the website, you'll see more text, more prose. But I'll give you 3 that stand out in my mind out of the 14. 3 really do stick out in the context of innovation. One, first and foremost, and I hope if you're Amazon customers, you will have felt this in other ways, but the first and foremost one, of course, in the context of innovation at Amazon is customer obsession. We are a customer company. This is how we have built ourselves, have structured ourselves for 2 decades, and it's real. We really do obsess over our customers, and we think about, we're aware of our competitors, but we obsess over our customers. Well, in the context of innovation, or perhaps other things at Amazon as well, but certainly innovation, the customer obsession manifests itself best in our working backwards process. So here's the idea. Today, we have an idea for a product or service that we want to offer sometime in the future. Is it 6 months from now? Is it a year? Is it 4 years from now? But today, we sit down and we write out a press release and a detailed FAQ to go along with that press release for release in the future. So today we write the press release, and then we plan to release it sometime. Is it 6 months, 2 years, 4 years in the future? Well, what does this do for you? Well, first of all, it gives you a roadmap in a sense. And it's not a forward-looking roadmap, it's a backward-looking roadmap, because we now know what we want to do for our customers, and we work backwards from that date, that point in the future, to today to figure out what needs to be done. Now, there are a couple things about doing it this way, doing a press release. One is, by writing it down, it holds you accountable. I mean, how many times have we all been in a meeting where we all, the meeting agrees to do something, and then a few weeks, maybe it's a few months later, you kind of figure, well, what did we decide? Well, I think that sounds like a hard thing we decided. Maybe let's try this easier thing because that might have been what we decided. No, because you've written it down, it holds you accountable. You keep it in your desk drawer, you staple it to your wall. It's right there. You know what you're going to do for customers sometime in the future. Second, the cool thing about it is that you're writing it in customer language. You're not writing it in sort of technical jargon, internal speak. You're telling your customers what's in it for them, in their language, so they can understand it. It's up to you to figure out all those things in between that you've got to do to get to that point. And some of those things are going to be really complicated and hard and difficult to describe to customers. And you know what? Those customers, they don't care. They don't care about you have to develop this API and this routine and you have to develop. They care about what's in it for them, so you're writing it in their language. And lastly, perhaps the most subtle and interesting thing about this exercise is that by writing a press release and an FAQ today for release in the future, you are acknowledging that what you want to do is impossible today. else you'd just send out the press release. You'd write it and you'd give it to your PR team or your outside consultants, and they'd send it out on the PR wire, and that'd be the end of it. But you can't, because it's impossible. So this acknowledgement that to get from here to that point where this press release actually goes out, you have to invent stuff that can't be done today. It's a very humbling thing, but it's also very empowering, because you recognize, you humbly recognize that I can't do this. The company, the enterprise, the organization can't do this today, but we need to be able to figure out how to be able to do it sometime in the future. Now, I had the great pleasure and honor of working on a particular working backwards press release and FAQ, and it has to do with a service you may have heard about. It's a future drone delivery service. We call it Amazon Prime Air. And so let me give you a sense of roughly where things stand today with Amazon Prime Air.
Amazon is developing a service to use drones to safely deliver packages to customers in 30 minutes or less. It's called Prime Air. We've started a new private trial for customers in the Cambridge area of England, and on December 7th, we completed our first delivery. Customers will choose from a selection of thousands of items tucked away in a Prime Air fulfillment center located just over the horizon from their homes. We have been operating fulfillment centers for quite a while now, but this one is unlike all the rest. These modest-looking buildings contain innovative Prime Air technology. Here's how it works. Moments after receiving the order, an electrically powered Amazon drone makes its way down an automated track and then rises into the sky with the customer's package on board. These drones are autonomous. From takeoff to landing and return, they operate completely on their own. Cruising quietly below 400 feet, carrying packages up to 5 pounds, and guided by GPS, our systems are designed to find their destinations safely. Within 30 minutes of placing the order, the customer receives their package. For this initial trial, customers can choose from the latest tech gadgets to their dog's favorite biscuits. We will use the data gathered during this beta test and the feedback provided by customers to expand the private trial to more customers over time. We're starting with 2 customers now, and in the coming months, we'll offer participation to dozens of customers living within several miles of our UK facility, and then growing to hundreds more. After that, well, it'd be easy to say, the sky's the limit. But that's not exactly true anymore, is it?
So pretty cool, huh? This is this whole idea of autonomous drones. I mean, it's really cool technology. I've seen this. I've been to the Cambridge facility several times, and you know, the notion that you can have a device that will receive a customer order, take off from a location of a warehouse, a fulfillment center, know its way to fly safely to a customer drop-off point, get there, figure out what to do, which isn't always the easy thing to do. For example, what if something has changed? What if they've planted a new tree? What if there's a crane that wasn't there 3 weeks ago, now it's there? Or what if there's a dog circling around in the yard barking at the thing? The drone needs to know what to do on its own. It's autonomous. It needs to figure out what's happening and then make a decision. Does it hover and wait for the customer to come out and bring the dog in? Does it land in spite of the dog? Maybe it's a little dog. Does it take off and just return without making the delivery? All that kind of intelligence is built into the drone. And so we've had to do things like hire up and get smart in this area. We've hired a bunch of aeronautical engineers, test pilots. We have a former astronaut on team. All these, and one of the challenges, for example, is we're in propeller design. It turns out that designing propellers that are strong, efficient, and quiet is a real technological challenge. So we've hired up all these folks who are bringing it together and are working on it. Here are 3 of the vehicles that we've shown publicly. The concept is we know that our customers live in a variety of different circumstances, some urban and wet, some dry and rural, and everything in between. And so we're going to have a family of different vehicles that will be able to serve our customers. So technology is really cool. And it's very easy to get lost in the technology, especially you see a video like that, and you say, that is just really great. But the real important player in that video is Richard B. He's the customer. He has a particular need. He wants a bag of popcorn in less than 30 minutes of an order. And this is just the way to get it to him. It's cool technology, but the real important thing is that when we put out that press release, it's going to talk about Richard B. getting his popcorn within 30 minutes of an order. And all the other tough things we're working on, propeller design included, it doesn't matter to customers. What matters is they get the package. So again, it's that customer focus. We want to make sure that the customer can get an order delivered to him or her within 30 minutes of an order, and all that other stuff that we're working on, working backwards to the present, is just designed as the means to the end. Okay, so what about the other leadership principles? Well, let's just take a quick look at this. Oh, this is actually quite important. This is how we describe customer obsession on the website, right? This is a little bit more detail about it. An important component of it is, although leaders pay attention to competitors, they obsess over their customers. And the idea is this, that so many enterprises actually spend a whole lot of time focused on competitors, what they're doing. But that's not the way it works. That's not the best way to do things. We really firmly believe that by focusing on customers, obsessing over them, then we're not distracted by what competitors are doing. In AWS, we say it slightly differently. Look at this. Launch is the starting line, not the finish line. I love this phrase because it has two meanings. Obviously, we want to say that when we launch something, that's the starting line. We're not going to be done with it. We want to iterate. We want to improve. We want to work with our customers and make sure the thing gets better and it works for them, and deploy it for them in a way that's useful and improve it. And so, but it's also launches the starting line in the sense of working backwards. So there's the launch, but it's the starting line to get back to where we are today, to figure out how to get to that point, what we need to invent. All right. So in addition to customer obsession, what's another of what are the other two leadership principles that come to mind in the context of innovation at Amazon? One of them is actually kind of difficult to say, but you can see it written out here, and that is this: our right, a lot. Our right, comma, a lot. Well, nobody wants to be wrong. I mean, being wrong is not fun. Being right is much more fun. It's much more attractive. So, but it doesn't say our right. It doesn't even say our right most of the time. It certainly doesn't say our right all the time. It says our right a lot, which means it's okay to be wrong. In fact, you can be wrong a lot. And here's the context in which you can be wrong. Innovation requires experimentation. Otherwise, how do you know that you're innovating? If you're actually doing something new, you have to be able to experiment. And if you're actually experimenting, you have to be able to have the possibility of failure. Else it's not an experiment. I think one of the things that gets confusing is, a lot of us in school growing up, we probably had some sort of a science class, a biology or a physics class, something, and we performed experiments in the class. Well, the teacher knew how it was going to turn out, and probably if you were a reasonably good student, you knew how it was supposed to turn out. But because you knew, and because the teacher knew, it wasn't an experiment. It was just a demonstration of something that was probably an experiment 100, 200 years ago. Somebody else did it. An actual experiment must have the possibility of failure. And so if you're experimenting at Amazon in the context of innovation, failure is okay. Now, failure for performance reasons isn't okay. That's not the right thing. You slept in, or you didn't try, or you made bad decisions. That's a different thing. But if you're actually trying something new, you're experimenting, actually innovating, it's okay to be wrong at Amazon. And so here's a couple of examples where we were very painfully wrong. Back about the time that I joined Amazon, we had, believe it or not, an auction site. Probably none of you remember this, but we did. We tried. And when we introduced this, the investment community and the press thought this was a crazy idea. Wait a minute, you're a retailer. You buy stuff wholesale, you put it in a warehouse, and you sell it off at retail. The only novelty to what you're doing, Amazon, is that you're doing it online. That was really it. That was the novelty. There wasn't this in-store interaction. But the thought that we would come in and introduce an auction business where somebody could come in and sell used, the kinds of things that we were trying to sell new and take away our new sales, was just anathema to the investment community. Well, we thought about it differently. We looked at it as a way, well, this is a way to get our buyer customers some more selection. And it was a way to perhaps bring in a new class of customers, the seller customer. Well, as it turns out, for a variety of reasons, our auction business was terrible. It fizzled. No one used it. Well, then we said, OK, maybe it was because of the variable pricing. Why don't we have a fixed price business? Why don't we do something like this? It was called Z Shops, Z Shops. It's another thing that I'm sure you haven't heard of, but it existed for a while. And it amounted to a separate, segregated corner of our website where our retail business would be in one area and Z Shops is over here in another area. And it would force a customer, if she came to the retail business and she looked for something that she wanted and didn't find it, well, then she could go over here and look too and see if Z Shops sellers are offering it. Again, the investment community hated this idea. They said, oh, now you're allowing new sales of the same products you're trying to sell on your website. That's foolish. And think about it. In the high street store, you can't walk in and have a set of, say, sweaters or shoes and say, can we please sell them alongside yours? Well, no, that never happens. Now, it's not because they're mean people. It's just because they have limited shelf space. At Amazon, we didn't have limited shelf space, so we were able to do this. We were able to sell things at retail and offer third parties the opportunity to sell. Well, again, it was a failure largely because of this crazy notion where a buyer would have to come in and search one set of selection and then search another. Well, ultimately, these two failures led to Marketplace, which I hope if you're familiar with Amazon, you've seen something like this before, where something is for sale, and it's for sale by a variety of sellers. But look at this. This is something for a seller is offering this for 133 pounds, and that seller gets featured up here, but our retail business is also trying to sell this, but for 140 pounds. And so you can see the price competition right there on the website. Our retail business is going to lose a sale here because this other seller is going to get the sale because they're offering it at a better price, a better value. This is great for our buyer customers, but it's also great because we recognize that our retail business can face competition right on our own website. It's a great outcome for everybody. And it turns out that now more than half of the things sold through Amazon websites are not sold by Amazon. They're sold by somebody else. So after two massive failures, it turned out we finally got it right, and there it is. How do we say it? Well, this is an interesting way of saying things. Strong judgments and good instincts, that's important. Seeking diverse perspectives is important. But look at the last phrase of being right a lot here. Leaders work to disconfirm their beliefs. So it's not only okay to be wrong and to fail, you actually have to try to be wrong and fail. You actually have to try to make your own ideas fail. And you can never prove an idea right. I think this is a pretty basic philosophy. You can't prove it right, but if you try to prove it wrong over and over and over again and you fail to prove it wrong, you can have a fairly good sense that what you're doing is a pretty good idea. Leaders at Amazon are taught not only to accept failure, but also to actively try to get their own ideas to fail. At AWS, we talk about pioneering by being willing to experiment, being willing to fail in an experiment allows you to innovate, and it allows you to pioneer and do things that nobody else has done because you have to be willing to fail. It's interesting, too. Failing is important because not only because it's part of the experimentation and innovation process, but also because you want to be able to fail fast. You don't want to take a long time to fail. You want to fail fast. And at Amazon, we break down our decision-making into two kinds of decisions. One are what we call type 1 decisions. It's kind of jargony, but it's the type 1 decision are essentially irreversible decisions, or ones that would be really hard to undo. Those kinds of decisions, we spend a lot of time focused on them. And making sure that we have as much information as reasonably possible before making that decision. But it turns out in any organization, the vast majority of decisions are not type 1. They are what we call type 2, which are ones that if they don't work out, you can back away from them. You can reverse out of them. And those kinds of decisions, again, the vast majority of ones, are the ones that you need to be making fast. And so The process for decision making at Amazon is very interesting. We actually have what we call the 6-pager and meeting. The concept is this, that when we're faced with a decision, whether it's a type 1 irreversible decision or a type 2 decision, which we can move a lot faster and use less information to make the decision, we actually force the advocates of the decision to write in prose a document. In prose, no bullet points allowed, no PowerPoint allowed, but write it out in sentences. This makes you commit. It makes you think about what you're proposing much more than just writing out bullet points. And then we'll have a meeting. And the meeting certainly, it goes like this, and I think all the Amazonians in the room have experienced this. You sit down, and the team that's making the decision, even the team that goes all the way up to the top at Amazon, will sit down and just read the document for the first half hour. It's eerily silent. The meeting is, there's just no noise for 30 minutes, nothing. What this does is it gets everybody exactly to the same spot of understanding what's being proposed. Because you know how it is. You go to meetings, sometimes you're the only one who read the document, nobody else did, or you read it 3 weeks ago and you've kind of forgotten about it, or you kind of scanned it on the tube on the way in. I mean, this puts everybody on the same page, and then that last half hour is for discussion and actually making the decision. This is part of the way we make these decisions at Amazon. Okay, so lastly, so those 3 leadership principles that apply to innovation at Amazon. This last one is easily the most prosaic, but it's equally important to the other 2, and that is deliver results. Right? All the obsessing over customers in the world, all the being right a lot, all that experimentation, trying things, getting them to fail, and finally getting it to the point where you're confident that you can deliver it to your customers, all that doesn't matter a whit if it doesn't actually work for your customers. You have to deliver it. And so we've had some successes over the years with this, a lot of failures along the way that aren't on this list. These are where we were actually able to deliver results after trying for a long time and getting things hopefully right for our customers. There are more to come, for sure. Lots more failures to come as well. Hopefully not as many public failures, but we are failing all the time. And that's because we're trying to experiment all the time and we're trying to innovate all the time. Leaders never settle. That's a big point. You don't settle. You have to actually get it to the customer, then all the other stuff is just theoretical in their views. And at Amazon, interestingly, we use the same building blocks to build out things at AWS that we offer up to our AWS customers. And so we're using essentially the same tools internally. And also interestingly, something like over 90% of the new innovations that we have in AWS come from customer feedback. So we're not only trying to think ahead for them, we're actually listening also and getting lots of great feedback, which helps us innovate and do more for our customers. So there they are. Those are the 3 leadership principles that come to mind. I'll leave you with this. These are the 6 suggestions I've offered to you over this half hour, and you can try these. And I acknowledge 3 of them are easy and 3 of them are harder. The 3 easy ones, try the 2-pizza team. What's the harm? Just see if it works. And if it does in your organization, that's great. Second, write a press release. Every single person in this room probably should be able to write 3 to 5 press releases about something they want to do for their customers, you want to do for your customers sometime in the future. Stick it in your desk drawer. It's not to say that at some point it's ever going to be released, but the whole idea is that you're focusing on what you want to do for them, you're writing it in their language, so what's in it for them, you're holding yourself accountable, and you're also acknowledging that you can't do it exactly today. So write it. I've got several in my desk drawer that nobody else has seen. That I'm holding myself accountable for, but nobody else knows about, and I'm pretty confident never will actually be a press release. But try it anyway. Do the 6-pager in the meeting. This is the only one that takes a little bit of work, and it's just the work is for the person who has to write it. They may not be thrilled about it, but it's going to force them to think more about it, and it's going to put the decision makers in your organization in a better place to make the decision. Then the 3 harder ones, I get that. Customer obsession, not thinking about competitors, that can be hard. Being right a lot, being willing to fail is a tough one, but make reversible decisions fast. I think that's something that you need to do. And then lastly, deliver results. Actually do what you planned and hopefully put out that press release. Thank you very much.
Awesome. Thank you very much indeed, Paul. Now, one thing just to add to what Paul said there is that this is not something that is sort of locked in a walled garden within the headquarters of Seattle. Right? This is something that we live and we breathe every day in every office around 190 countries in the world that we operate in. So it really is truly ingrained into how we hire, how we performance review, and how we think about new services, new products, and such like. And everybody builds, right? Everybody's an inventor. We have processes in place to make sure that that is the case. We get our teams together and we think about the next thing that we want to offer customers. So hopefully you took something away from that. Hopefully you'll be able to practice certainly some of those three simple things that Paul mentioned, and you'll get some value. Now, what I want to do now is transition to answering some of the other questions that we hear most often from customers, and really kind of in the principles of what are the tips and the tricks that you can learn from subject matter experts at AWS and also from other customers in terms of how to transform your organization, leveraging technology and leveraging the AWS cloud. Now, we like to hear from customers, and we will be hearing from customers, and we like to hear from subject matter experts as well. And my next speaker is actually somebody who combines both. Not too long ago, he was sat in an audience quite like this, and he was transforming his business at Expedia from being largely a company that owned data centers and run data centers to being really kind of agile in the cloud. These days, he plies his trade helping other companies to transform their businesses at AWS. So I'm really pleased to welcome to the stage Thomas Blood.
Well, good morning. I'm also very, very pleased to be here with you this morning. I appreciate you all coming early and sitting through and listening through what we have to say. I want to share some of the experiences I've had personally, as well as the kinds that I hear from our customers every day. So let's start. This is a very, very common one. How do I prepare? How do I get going? And when you ask about, am I ready? That's actually a bit of a pitfall, because whether you're ready or not, you should get going. Start. Don't wait, right? But to answer the question around how do I prepare, it's very easy to think about this as a technology problem only, and it's not. So my challenge when I've gone through this process was not technology, it was culture, it was change, it was transformation. So do you have executive buy-in? Without executive buy-in, this is a very, very hard journey. Do you have a business case? Do you understand why you're doing this? Why are you trying to transform your business? Why are you going into the cloud? What are you getting out of it? What about skills? Are your teams do they have the right mix of skills? Do they have the right kinds of experience? And do you have a strategy? How does your cloud transformation fit into your business strategy? Those are key questions that you have to think about and answer before you get going. So if you answered no to any of these questions, by the way, we can help you get to yes. That's what we do. If you look at the business case, for example, so on the business case, there are many, many, many compelling kinds of reasons. When I went through this process, we did not focus at cost. Many of our customers do. We wanted to become more agile and more flexible and have a better time to market and be responsive and be able to react when things change in the marketplace and to have a more resilient platform, something that we could build on for the future. And you can combine all of these kinds of issues around why you want to have this cloud migration, this process. Later on today, we have in reInvent, we have a course or a presentation on building a business case. And I encourage you, if you're going to reInvent in Las Vegas, go take that class. Go sit through that presentation. It's very helpful. So the next question is, how do I actually move forward once I get started? And we think about this in sort of 5 major components. You have security, you have products and services, you have your back office system, you have infrastructure, you have end user computing. And you can start with any of these. It doesn't have to be infrastructure. You can start with any of these. And AWS has services that you can leverage to move forward. So you can have, for example, if you want to provide end user computing, we have something called workspaces where you can provide desktops to your customers. Again, there's a large plethora. I won't get into all the details. There's a large plethora of services that address all of these areas, and you can pick any one of them to get going. AWS lends itself to experimentation and innovation. We heard this great presentation. Thank you. I love that presentation. I've heard it many times. And when you think of how we innovate and how we experiment, it's about small batches. It's about trying things. It's about having the courage to try a small thing, get it out to your customer, and do it without expending a lot of money on it. So to help illustrate some of these innovation approaches, please welcome Ian Massingham, Director of Global Evangelism.
Good morning. Good morning. It's great to be here with you this morning. I'm going to be on stage for a couple of minutes. I just want to talk briefly about one of the other substantial areas of AWS usage. Pretty much everybody that's in the room here this morning will come from a larger organization that has long history in serving their customers. We're focusing here today on putting the cloud to work for established businesses. But there is also a very large team at Amazon Web Services that focus on a different kind of customer, that focus on working with startups, working with brand new businesses that when they start don't have any customers. In fact, in a lot of cases, all they have at day one is an idea about a problem that they want to help customers solve. And when AWS got started back in 2006, this was the first cohort, the first type of organization that started to put AWS services to work. And there were a few reasons for that, actually. One of those reasons was that AWS itself was a startup, and like all successful startups, we started with an MVP, or a minimum viable product. And this contained a couple of services, actually, something called EC2, which is a service for running compute workloads, applications in the cloud, and another service called S3, which is a service for storing and retrieving data from the cloud. Both of them had very minimal feature sets, especially in comparison to the way that those services look today. And those minimal feature sets meant that those services could not be used by many of the kinds of organizations that are here today. They were very useful for organizations that were building software and building products that could take advantage of the characteristics of these services, but engineer around some of those early constraints. This meant that AWS was adopted at day one by organizations that were building brand new technology on this platform. And the reason for that was there's natural affinity between the characteristics of the AWS cloud and the needs of brand new businesses. They have limited capital. And in fact, capital for startups equals time. So the more capital you have, the longer you have to get to a viable and sustainable business model. Okay, so the more efficient you can make your use of capital, the longer the runway is for you to get your new business off the ground, quite literally in some cases, and create that business model that will return the investment that your shareholders have made, your investors have made in the company, and ultimately allow you to create a viable and long-lived business moving forward. The second thing is, in finding that viable business model, startups do a lot of experimentation. In fact, in my experience, startups spend way more time on experimentation than established businesses do. And again, there's really strong affinity between the characteristics of the AWS cloud and the experimental nature of startup businesses. There are really 6 broad areas of benefit. So the first is converting capital expense to operational expenditure. The second is benefiting from the scale that AWS can provide to help startups deal with growth. The third is the fact that that scale removes the need for startups to think about capacity planning or capacity guessing, as I like to call it. In fact, I've got a really great horror story I could tell you about this from earlier in my career when I worked on service launch for something called FreeServe, which will be familiar to a lot of the people in this room that are in maybe 35 to 40 plus bracket. It's the service that popularized mass use of narrowband internet here in the UK, and that's when my hair went white. Okay? That's how difficult it was for us to deal with the level of growth that we were seeing on that service. If only we'd had AWS when we were doing that, how much simpler things might have been for us back then. Fourthly, increasing speed and agility. Fifthly, reducing the investment overhead for running technology. And sixthly, and this is actually something that I think is sometimes underappreciated by many customers, the fact that using the cloud makes it much easier to address a global audience. We have a very successful customer here in the UK called FanDuel, which some of you may now know as a fantasy sports operator that provides some fantasy sports products associated with Premier League football. Actually, a company that's been operating for several years in the US market, providing fantasy sports products that focus on American football and also on baseball as well. And that's a company, believe it or not, with engineering headquartered in Edinburgh that launched in the US with almost no footprint on the ground in the United States and built a fantastically successful business from about 3,000 miles away from their nearest customer. Now, how would you do that without AWS and the cloud? It would just be impossible to do that. So what you've seen over the course of this 11-year period during which we've been operating is that using AWS has become the de facto model for startups. Using the cloud has become the de facto model, and using AWS has been the cloud of choice for organizations of this type. Okay? We've got great referenceability. In fact, we've got references that you would look at on this slide, and you would think, are they still a startup? If you look at somebody like Airbnb, well, they've not had what we might call a value realization event, so they haven't IPO'd, and they haven't been acquired by anybody, but they are a big, big, big business. In fact, every night they have about 500,000 guests staying in accommodation that is brokered by Airbnb all over the globe. And just to give you a benchmark, that's about 5 times as big as a hotel group like Crown Plaza Hotels. Okay, so this is a really big company, and it's grown to that level of scale over just a 5-year period. And that growth has been both enabled by using AWS services as a platform upon which to build, but also running data-driven experiments that take advantage of AWS services to gain insights about how Airbnb should direct their business. How should they evolve their products? Which markets should they target? What kind of product should they create? And that experimental mindset is woven tightly into the DNA of organizations like Airbnb, FanDuel, Deliveroo, Monzo, and Starling Bank, who we're going to hear from a little bit later on in the keynote this morning as well. There are also thousands and thousands and thousands of other startups that are using AWS today that you haven't heard of. At least you haven't heard of them yet. So to help you understand a little bit more about how you can put some of these ideas into practice inside the established enterprise, I want to hand it back over to Thomas. Thank you.
Thanks. Thank you. So again, when you think about innovation or transformation, one of the key elements is having the right team in place and making sure that you have guidelines and boundaries and guardrails that prevent you from going over a cliff. Because it's easy to make mistakes if you go too fast and headlong into, rush into things. So one mechanism we have and recommend, and something I did at Experian when I did this transformation, is to create a cloud center of excellence. And this cloud center of excellence has a number of functions. It's responsible for architecture. It provides the architectural framework, and cloud architecture is different. And it's a very, very different way of thinking about building applications and systems. So they provide the reference architectures and the thought leadership around architecture. They will handle identity management. They will deal with cost management and migration management. And they're comprised of a small team, typically, again, a 2-pizza team essentially, of experts who are architects, who are security experts, who might understand the cost model. And this team will help the organization as a whole move forward over time. It will have a single-threaded leader, and that single-threaded leader will report directly to the CIO. The leader might be the CIO. They are also responsible for the training, for knowledge transfer, for educating the larger team on what cloud is. They might have a change management role, right, to help the organization at large understand what they're getting into and what is required. And they will provide a hybrid architecture. When you go on this journey as an enterprise, you're not going to typically go all in right away. You will, for a time, have a hybrid architecture. It's a very, very important piece. And so to help us understand an example of an organization that has gone through this process and has created their Cloud Center of Excellence, please let me welcome Andrew Brim, CDO of Aviva.
Good morning. Good to be here. For those of you who don't know, Aviva is one of the world's largest insurance companies. Insurance, you're probably thinking, not exactly known for its innovation or disruption. And you're right, it's stuck in the dark ages. So there is an irony about that as well, which is that in fact, probably being conservative has been a huge advantage in our industry until now. It's probably why we're so old. I mean, Aviva itself is 321 years old. And we trace our origins back to an event that started extremely close to this spot, less than a mile away in Pudding Lane. So the origins of insurance, as we know it today, were in fact the Great Fire of London of 1666. And in a bizarre, kind of ironic mirror of today's life, it started with a few people talking in the fashionable coffee shops of the 17th century about how they could find a more intelligent solution when terrible things happen, such as your house burns down. So that's where we come from. But that isn't going to do for us in the future. And so our future includes AWS. But we trace even that back a little bit. This may feel unlikely, but this is where AWS started for us. There's a chap there, the Deputy General of Norwich Union, who in 1958 had some very forward-thinking thoughts. And in fact, because he was a very precise gentleman, I will quote him directly. He's an actuary, of course. So he talked, and this is in our archives, of course, about an important development, the electronic computer. He was somewhat prescient, in fact, because he goes on to say that there is a doubt about computers, and it is that too much data can be digested for too little result. Unfortunately, he then goes rather off-piste by saying, computers are not the answer to all our problems. There will not be a solution, a single solution to office equipment. So he was sort of along the right lines. Not a very diverse bunch, as you can tell, and and hard to believe that rock and roll is just around the corner. I mean, not for that lot, quite frankly. To get more specific, though, he did do something sensible, which was to order our first mainframe computer. And there it is, arriving in Norwich on the back of, I mean, that's actually not all of it. There were some other lorries with it on the back. It was an Orion Ferranti mainframe computer. But that, ladies and gentlemen, is where our AWS journey started. Now look, we do face a problem, and that is that our industry is not exactly sexy. And this is a real societal problem, because the result of it being complex and, dare I say it, dull for many people, is that people make no or bad decisions. And this isn't a trivial point either. Sure, you can't go that far wrong with motor insurance these days. However, when it comes to things like saving and investing for your future, for pensions, any of you who read the papers, or whatever digital version of papers you read today, will know this is actually a massive societal problem. Certainly is in the UK. So the average private pension pot in the UK is £40,000. Sounds like a nice sum of money. In fact, it buys you basically £2,000 per year after you retire. This is a problem. And we need digital in all its guises to gently tug our consumers' heads from out of the sand and get them to engage in these difficult topics. When you research words like pension, the immediate result from customers is they think of death. So this is actually an enormous digital product and design challenge for all of us. And we have to create a very, very powerful ecosystem to drive engagement, frequency and quality of engagement in something that, frankly, customers are totally blanking. Data center, you will be very familiar with this. Not so long ago, owned and operated, people with screwdrivers, changing the kind of robot wheels and so on. But data is our lifeblood. Now, I know everyone says that, but ironically, in our industry, it always has been our lifeblood. Because if you think about what insurance is, the way to win in insurance is to better predict the risk to an individual or an asset than your competitors. And that is a heck of a science. And it's been a science that's been going on for a long time. Now, we figured out a while back that it's quite useful to know, where people live and how old they are and, what social group they might be from or whatever to predict risk. In today's world, that is just the tip of an iceberg. I mean, there are lots of wonderful little anecdotes that go with this, such as, the fact that apparently the length of your drive is a great predictor as to whether you'll be burgled. Well, in today's age, and Google Street View and satellite photography, the interesting point is all of these data points are utterly available to us. So data for us has become the entire business. So more seriously to AWS, how do we use that? Why is it critical to our competitive advantage? Well, look, first of all, speed. We are very well aware that the game of accessing non-traditional sources of data and applying very advanced analytical techniques is not just our own. And so the speed with which we can set up systems, set up servers, configure them, is a huge source of competitive advantage. The second area are the features that were being referred to earlier. Now, I guess I'm speaking to the converted, or at least the expert here, but you'll know that cloud is absolutely not about storage. It's about the incredibly rich feature set that actually allows you to use all of that data. That's really powerful for us. The third bit is security. This, for a business like ours, we're in about 17 different countries, huge number of legacy systems, well over 100. For us, to be able to use the cloud in inbuilt security systems is very, very powerful and essential. And I guess finally, cost. So you'll be very aware that AWS is about paying not for what you might need, but actually for what you use. And that makes a huge difference to us too. So for us, you can see we've been on a long journey. Mark my words, insurance is being disrupted. But we're also very conscious that we've only just started. And we look forward to working together for the next 321 years. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew. So Aviva has also migrated a large portion of their IT portfolio into the cloud, into AWS, and have encountered some of the patterns I'm going to share with you. We see these patterns throughout our customers, and there are 6 of them. So it starts off with understanding your inventory. What do you have? Ironically, this is actually a non-trivial problem. Many of us, myself included, in past life, running data centers and working in IT, you don't really know what you have until you really start digging. This is a critical step, and you'll be surprised to find things that you had no idea were out there that are antiques, essentially. Once you know what you have, you get into this idea of rehosting, of lifting and shifting. And most of our customers will rehost about 50% of what they have in their inventory. To facilitate this, we have developed a number of tools to automate the process. Many of our customers, however, choose to do their first migrations manually, by hand. And I actually encourage you to do this because it's very instructive. It helps you understand how cloud works. It helps you to start apply this new way of thinking about cloud architectures. Many customers also take the opportunity to what we call lift, tinker, and shift, where you take something, you improve it a little bit, and then you rehost it. A very common and easy thing to do is repurchase, right? Today, with the wide availability of SaaS offerings, this is an obvious thing to do. So you could evaluate existing services you have, existing systems you have, and decide, you know what, I'm just going to park this old thing and get something brand new that's already in the cloud. When I went through this process 3 years ago, I chose to re-architect. I wanted to make use of the richness of the ecosystem, of all the services that were available. So I didn't migrate very, very much. Mostly, I rebuilt things cloud native in the cloud to leverage this amazing ecosystem of Lego blocks that you can use to build anything you need. It also forces you, again, to rethink your architecture, to maybe go smaller. It's an opportunity to embrace things like microservices and to re-architect how your systems work end-to-end. This is my favorite option, retire things. And you will find, when you go through this process, probably 10, maybe 20% of your inventory is old and should just go away. You know, it's a security risk in some cases. It's antiquated. It might have a very, very small business function. You might say, well, this is really not worth supporting for the value we're getting out of it. Just retire it. And then you'll have some amount of workload, some amount of infrastructure left that you can retain, but crucially, revisit. Because as we continue to develop services and offerings in the cloud, you can then go back a year later and say, maybe there's something now that can actually fulfill this need, and I can move it over. So one customer who has gone through this kind of migration effort is River Island. River Island is a UK retailer that's been around since 1948. They have migrated 90% of their portfolio, I think is correct. So to tell us more about this migration to AWS, please welcome Doug Gardner, CIO, River Island.
So good morning, everybody. I'm Doug, and I'm here to talk to you today about the transformation of River Island. We are moving from a traditional bricks and mortar retailer to a leading digital omni-channel retailer, and that's quite a big jump. So first, I want to talk a little bit about the history of our company. So as you can see here, what we're in the business to do is make people feel good by spreading the joy of fashion. So that's pretty fun. The business itself, River Island, is about 30 years old. The brand goes back, 30 years. The company itself, though, has greater heritage. It goes back to 1948. It started as a fruit and veg stall in a bomb crater in East London. It then moved indoors to become Lewis Separates. And in the swinging 60s, it really got into high fashion with a brand called Chelsea Girl, which some of you may be familiar with. Later, it expanded to menswear with Concept Man. And then, like I said, 30 years ago, it became River Island. So a lot of change. It's a family business. The owner, Mr. Bernard, still owns and runs the business along with his family. So it has quite a big heritage with that. We have 300 stores. We do franchise, we do retail, we do wholesale, and we have a big digital business through our website. So quite a bit of stuff there. Our whole business, our DNA is about change. We're fast fashion, so we're used to adapting constantly. As you can see, our fascia has changed quite a bit over the years. The brand itself has changed, so good DNA of change. But today, we really face probably one of our biggest challenges, and this is what's driving our transformation. The retail industry itself is going through dramatic change on how customers interact with brands. Technology now is so deeply embedded into the retail experience, and the pace of change is great. And the second thing that we're being hit with really hard is the way that we develop and build systems inside of River Island. So those two big things are what's driving most of the transformation. So let's talk first about the change in the way we build and deliver things. So we have come from a background of traditional data centers, big iron, mainframes, databases, all kinds of traditional type stuff. But we've been rapidly moving towards the cloud, and we've been engaging with Amazon for probably about the last 18 months, but the journey's been going on for a little bit longer than that. And as you can see from my diagram, there's loads of icons of stuff we use at Amazon. I probably don't know what half of the things do, but one thing to note here is that our migration to the cloud is not just about infrastructure. That's where we started. With Cloud Reach, we moved over our website and had a great success with that. But most of the gains that we're seeing come from the platforms, either platforms as databases, platforms as services to power our microservices, all the tools around it. These things, the key is it's making us work faster. It's enabling us to do things in minutes and days, which used to take us months and years. So speed is very important. Agility and ability to react are the main reasons we move to the cloud. Again, remember, it's not just about infrastructure. It's where we started, but that's not the main driver behind it. So if I talk a little bit about retail now. So like I said, the retail market is changing so dramatically. We're getting hit by a lot of new pure play fashion businesses. Boohoo, ASOS, Misguided, and even Amazon are really dramatically changing the footprint of retail. They're born of a digital era. They have new systems, new ways of working, new infrastructure. They haven't got the constraints of physical stores, and they've got massive investment to scale. So they're really changing the proposition to our customers. They're offering a great service and really changing the face of the retail. Tech is deeply embedded in it, and it's having an impact on a traditional retailer like River Island. We're also getting hit with digital customers that are not anything to do with retail per se. Uber, for example, has completely changed people's perception of how you pay for something, and that has an impact on us. Netflix and Spotify, now people expect a personal experience whenever they engage with a brand. And my favorite now is Instagram. It completely changes the way that we all interface with each other, and it's how people want to interface with us. Note our hashtag, I'm wearing RI, and that's how people interface with our brand now. So all these things have created quite a problem for River Island, being a traditional retailer for that long. It took us quite a while to adjust to this, but the company realized what was going on, said this is definitely the future. We need to embrace technology. We need to change the way we develop things, and we need to put tech at the heart of our retail business. So that was great. This happened a few years ago. Got the board to understand this, that we needed to compete. We needed to become a digital retailer now. That was the beginning of the journey, though. So the biggest question we had to ask ourselves was, what does it really mean to be a digital retailer? So the inclination to begin with was, let's just throw a load of money at buying some really cool tech to compete with these guys. That'll make us a digital retailer. But unfortunately, that was not true, because it created this. We went out and bought a load of lovely shiny things and built them on top of a big pile of poo. And that's really what happened. You know, we had 15-year-old infrastructure, 15-year-old systems, and antiquated ways of working. So it was never going to work. So the biggest job we had was to convince the board to invest heavily in an infrastructure and changing the ways that we work to get to this. Great foundations, again, on new infrastructure, new ways of working, restructuring the company, enabled us to move very fast and rapidly, and then we could plug all these cool things on top of stuff. So these are some very, very fundamental things that made us a digital business. And it was a hard sell, because we were investing in things that weren't shiny. Infrastructure, people, ways of working, process, all of those things were being a long sell. It took quite a while, quite a bit of money and time to get them embedded before you started to see results. We did this through education. I spent a lot of time with the chief executive, the family, the board, and all the other directors explaining what it really meant to be a digital company. I took our chief executive to Amazon in Seattle to expose him to what a digital company looked like. We've been to Silicon Valley. I've been to Tel Aviv. I've spent a lot of time educating. And now I would say my chief executive is a chief executive of a fashion company, but also a digital company. So our journey has just begun. It's not over, but we're seeing some real benefits already from this journey. So if I look at things, for example, now we have a lot of great stuff sitting in the cloud like our website. When we hit Black Friday or giant promotional events, we can scale up, scale down. We have resilience. There's all of our new systems we build into this thing. We can build these things at speed, and it's resilient. We no longer have any kind of data center. This is a common theme. All of the time and effort that it went into worrying about data centers and power and air conditioning, I now devote my team to solving problems. And I think the most important thing is this bit on the right. It's all of the platforms that are available on Amazon. We now can experiment. We can move much quicker than ever before, because it's cheap to fire things up, try them, and throw them away if they don't work, and they're resilient. What's the future look like? I think it's more of the same. It's continuing to build out. The journey has just begun, and we're going to continue to build on it. The big key for us is opening things up so we can share data and we can integrate with the outside world. So we're going to advance in things like machine learning. We're going to build out data lakes so we can share our data and work with people, redo all of our data backbones. There's a lot of all this stuff. But again, the main thing here is our main thrust to become a digital company was to redo our infrastructure so that we could move fast, and that's going to enable us to become a leading digital high street omnichannel retailer. Thank you.
So in 2015, I was working at Experian in the US, and we decided to go to the cloud. And the very first objection was security. Our CISO, our board, was terrified of the idea of moving data into the cloud, this new thing that nobody really knows. Is it secure? Well, that conversation has changed in the last 2 years. It's gone from, is it secure, to why is it secure? And so the reason it is secure is that for us, for AWS, Security is job zero. If you're a programmer, zero is where you start. You don't start with one. And it's embedded into everything we do. Anytime we make a change, anytime we make an improvement, anytime we create a new feature, we start with security. So that's the foundation, the baseline for everything we do. Secondly, we have scale. And at our scale, we can bring in the best expertise in the world. We can spend a lot of resources on security automation, on monitoring, on countermeasures. So we can build out this very, very rich ecosystem of security services that we use ourselves and that we also offer you as services. And in addition, we have a strong partnership with our partners who can add additional security tools on top of what we offer to help make you as secure as possible. So when you go down this journey and you start thinking about architecture and you start thinking about new ways of doing business, and you ask questions about, are we doing business the way we have been in the past, or are we going to create something entirely differently? You invariably come up to this question of, well, what does the org look like? Do I have to reorganize? Do I have to restructure myself? And really, the fundamental question to ask before you talk about organization is your operating model. Do you have the right roles, people in the roles that achieve particular outcomes? This is outcome-driven, that provides capability and value to your business. So if you start there, it'll point you in the right direction of what the organization has to become. The second thing to consider is it's a journey. We have all gone through reorganizations many times, and you kind of start here, and all of a sudden, presto, you're this. And really, this is about evolving into where you need to go. As I said earlier, a foundational piece of your organization must be a cloud center of excellence. You start there, and you can evolve around it. Paul talked about two pizza teams earlier. So when you start with these very small teams, and they get bigger, and they get too big, and you split them, you add more resources. So you're incrementally adding more teams to this new organization. So it's an evolution. It's not a, here's today, and here's the to-be state. You kind of have to grow your way there. And this is the other question that comes up. I have a huge inventory, a portfolio of investments that I've made over the last 10, 20, 30 years. What do I do with that? So obviously, you can't just throw it away, right? You want to get the value that you invested. And so you will have a hybrid environment for some time. And to make that possible, AWS has developed numerous services so that you can extend your environment, your infrastructure into the cloud. But I think of this as a transition as well, and I think over time, you will move more and more into the cloud because that's where you can innovate and go fast and experiment. We have also worked very, very closely with our partners who are and have been the leaders on on-prem technology solutions. VMware, Microsoft, Intel, SAP, and others. And together with them, we have created ways to extend those solutions into the cloud. It always comes back to people. And when I went on this journey 3 years ago, I spent a lot of time trying to recruit people who had already had experience in cloud architecture, cloud development, DevOps, and I couldn't find them. They were nowhere to be seen. And then I realized, I already have the people I need because I've hired them before. We hired smart people. You've hired smart people for roles and for reasons because they were the right person for the job. Well, those people can be the right people for the future, for this growth, for this movement. So what do? One is provide opportunities, give sandboxes, create environments where your employees can experiment and play and learn. Give them a little time to do that too. When you think of your first project, expose people to those projects so they get on-the-job training. When we did this, we didn't have any experience in the cloud either, and we had to learn by doing. And it's very, very powerful. And bring in a partner. I hired a very expensive consultant, but it was worth every penny, to help us get started, to help with the knowledge transfer. I actually wrote it in the contract. I said, it's not just about delivering outcomes for us. One of the outcomes is knowledge transfer. And then you're going to have some skills that you just don't have in-house, capabilities you cannot provide yourselves, and you will hire people. Hire people who can become coaches, who can train the rest of the team. And the superpower, the secret trick to all of this is invest in training. You can accelerate dramatically if you invest in training. And oh, by the way, you will signal very strongly to your organization that you're serious about this. You're investing in people. People will believe you when you do that. So we have a variety of training courses that you can choose from, anything from the foundational things all the way up to professional certifications. And as you walk around in the halls today, I think down at the stand, we actually are offering a 40% discount on any of these scheduled courses. So make sure you stop by the stand and get your discount code. We also have a session this afternoon that a colleague of mine is giving, which is addressing the skills gap. This is by Attila Lengyel. So to share some of the experience of what this looks like, of how you take an organization into the future, we will have a challenger bank, a bank that has built native in the cloud. They started with a new product, a new idea, with a team of skilled engineers, and they've built a cloud-native bank. And in fact, I think it's the first UK certified bank to be operating in the cloud. So with this, please welcome Anne, who is our CEO and founder, Anne Bowden, of Starling Bank.
It's a huge pleasure to be here today talking to you about Starling Bank. Today is AWS Transformation Day. And what I'd like to talk about is transforming an industry, a financial service industry, and particularly banking. And to be honest, the transformation of me. We talked earlier on about skills and what's going on in the industry about taking people that are used to very, very different environments and really moving them into a world that's changing very, very fast. And this is where my story comes in. I was a computer science grad in 1981, joining Lloyds Bank. I then spent a 30-year career running big enterprise systems. I was CIO, Chief Information Officer of Aon Corporation, the biggest insurance broker in the world. I ran 34 countries for transaction banking for RBS and ABN AMRO. I was Chief Operating Officer of Allied Irish Banks. In 2011, I left RBS and had a year in fintech. I thought I knew it all. I was very, very good at running anything that had a budget of $1 billion. But you put me in a small office, in a warehouse sort of office, with a couple of people that said they're going to build something in the cloud, and I didn't have a clue. Over 6 months, I began to realize that the world had changed. What it took me 30 million in a big bank to do, people were doing it in a warehouse for 30,000. And my initial skepticism was turned into an understanding that people had changed, technology had changed, and all of a sudden the financial services industry was far behind. I took some of those skills into Allied Irish Banks, where I was Chief Operating Officer, and my job there was to transform the organization, reduce cost base, really take the organization post-financial crisis into a new era. And lots of those skills I'd sort of gained in the fintech world transformed that organization, and we turned the organization into profitability. But I realized I needed to go further. I realized that people now had all these tools at their fingertips they didn't have in banking. I realized that technology has dramatically improved whilst the financial services industry, in particular banking, had been recovering from the financial crisis. And I realized that what I knew to be absolutely true about how to run projects and how to configure and how to deploy things was just totally wrong. The world had changed, and I had to do something about it. In January 2014, I quit my job, turned up in London to start a bank. And at that time, most people thought I was crazy. She's going to do a couple of things that had never been done before. It's going to be a fully regulated bank. It's going to be all about transactions and processing. It's going to be technology-driven and built from scratch. And it's going to be in the cloud. And there's this thing called AWS she keeps talking about. And the regulators said you can't do it. You know, real banks don't run in the cloud. The regulations say, CRD4 say, you can't do that. Well, we took on that challenge. And we started as a startup, just me, to build a bank in the cloud. And now we've been live for over a year. And our proposition is that data has to be used for the consumer's benefit, not against them. We're MasterCard issuers. We're one of 17 members of Faster Payments in the UK, one of only 3 banks in the UK that can sponsor other banks into the system, and the only bank in the UK that has direct access into Faster Payments with a real-time API. So as well as catching up with the existing banks, we've overtaken them. A couple of weeks ago, we went live with the Department of Work and Pensions and offered them a real-time API into Faster Payments. And we're currently working on that for Europe. Because we have all this data, we're using that data with machine learning and artificial intelligence to give people insights. And those insights we're sharing in a marketplace using PSD2 compliant interfaces, APIs. So we're a bank. We're fully regulated. We run in the cloud, and we're proud to love technology. I've spent my whole career running big, big budgets in big, big banks. And now we're doing the same with 150 people that I used to do for 20,000 people. But as well as delivering, we're raising the bar. And I think that we are going to really change, not just me, but the whole group of people in this industry that are pushing the frontier in banking and financial services to give customers what they really want. I'm proud of the fact that we have a bank and we're giving customers wonderful service. But I'm even more proud of the fact that I was able to forget what I knew, because the old world no longer existed. And the new world gives you so much. To those of you that are in enterprise organizations, that are running big budgets, that are trying to embrace technology, remember that a couple of hours spent talking to people in this new world are hours well spent. But we are still a startup, and we've got a long way to go. We have some huge customers on our banking as a platform service, as Starling payment services, as well as consumers and European customers to come, and business accounts to come. But we're still a startup. Therefore, I'd be most grateful if you could download the app and tell me what you think, okay? Okay. Thank you very much.
That was fabulous. All right, so to conclude our set of questions today, here's the questions again. As you go down this path, you will probably start, if you haven't gone down this path already, you will start with a project. Don't overanalyze, don't spend tons and tons of time thinking through the next 5 years of how you're going to get there. Just start. Start small, but go fast. Put together a small team, a tiger team, and get going. And then as you get your bearing and you start to understand what this thing is, this cloud thing, Build out your cloud center of excellence. Bring in the right resources to create the guardrails and the guidance and the training and the change management capabilities. And once you get muscle memory and the cloud center of excellence is established and operating smoothly, you can tackle migrations. You can start thinking about, okay, what of the inventory do I want to move over when? And we can help you with that. And then finally, when you get really comfortable in the cloud and you start thinking in cloud terms, you have an opportunity to rebuild your applications, to optimize things, to refactor legacy applications and rebuild them cloud native. But more importantly, and perhaps most importantly, you have an opportunity to rethink how you do your business and who your customers are and how you can reinvent yourselves for the future. That's all I have. I'm going to pass it back to Gavin for final concluding remarks.
Okay. Thanks. Thank you very much. Okay, so I hope you took something away from these talks this morning. This really was about sort of learning some tips and tricks, really at a semi-high level, so that we can go and take you into the breakout sessions that start at 11:20 and go a little bit deeper into some of the subjects that we covered today. I just want to take the time again to thank all of you for being with us this morning and traveling into town. I want to thank all of our speakers for their excellent stories. I do hope you took something away. And also, I'd like to say, if you're available at 4 o'clock, we're going to have a networking reception. So I tell you, the answers to most of these questions that you have are in the room. So take the time to have a drink. This is a brewery. Let's see if we can enjoy ourselves a little bit at 4 p.m. And continue to learn from each other. So with that, I thank you. Thanks again to our speakers, and have a great day. Thank you.
The keynotes have now finished. We will start the breakout sessions at 11:20.